Whenever I ask someone who their favorite FMA character is, Mustang usually seems to be pretty highly ranked. I guess it's pretty obvious why he would be. I actually think his popularity really spiked once Brotherhood was released, as he got to have some pretty awesome action sequences, demonstrating the best of his fire-based alchemy. His best fights with lust and envy in Brotherhood are the ones that probably stand out the most. Is that the only reason people like that character though? Among general fans of action anime, these scenes certainly would be attractive, much like many of the other fights in Brotherhood. While I think this helped, I'm pretty sure Mustang was a popular character even before Brotherhood. Now why is that? This seems like a pretty good opportunity for me to discuss why I like the character and why others may as well. That's probably why you clicked on this video, so I guess that would make sense. One of the major themes of FMA is the corruption of power, specifically in government. In general, this seemed related directly to prejudices and violent conflicts between people. I think it's pretty evident that with the horrors of the Ishvalan War and its effect on characters like Mustang, Winry, and Scar, that FMA takes on a pretty strong anti-war stance. However, I wouldn't say that it is necessarily anti-military. Many of the supporting characters of FMA are in the Amestris military, and much of the plot has to do with the ideas of honor and duty, and how they can sometimes come into conflict with morality, especially when leaders in the government are corrupt and the reasons for some orders may have vile origins. This, much like many of the other themes of the show, seems very relevant to issues in the real world. Wars are still common, and violent conflict has plagued mankind throughout all of our history. Man's internal conflict between base desires and emotions and maintaining some higher form of ethics is always on display, and much of FMA's focus is on this idea. In both anime and the manga, Bradley, obviously a soft stand-in for Adolf Hitler, turns out to be an inhuman monster. While some series might make this distinction to simplify the often much more complicated idea of evil, both anime delve deeper. Though pawns of other individuals, Bradley is still seen as having some characteristics and motivations in which he believes his actions are justified. More importantly, in the 2003 anime, he is part of a scheme to control the government orchestrated by a human being. In Brotherhood, though his master is more demonic or metaphysical in nature, it is still a dark reflection of humanity. In both series, the government shows many high-ranking military officials willing to commit terrible acts for their own greed, whatever their relation to the main villain may be. Evil, especially in authority, seems to be everywhere and somewhat independent of the shadowy villains. This is where Mustang comes in. In the beginning, Mustang seems to be somewhat antagonistic towards Ed, and his motivations aren't really certain. We know pretty quickly that he has plans to move up in the ranks and eventually become Führer, though we aren't certain why. It is revealed early on that, due to the terrible war he was a part of, Mustang is haunted by the deaths he caused. Many innocents were killed, and the war itself didn't seem to be justified in any way. This is his primary motivation. He wishes to use his skill to gain power and prevent such atrocities from occurring again, changing the government from within. When he learns of Bradley being a homunculus and the military being a pawn in a long plan to create such conflicts purely to obtain the power of the Philosopher's Stone, it becomes a much more urgent and dangerous operation. Mustang's guilt over his actions makes him a parallel to Edward, someone who also wishes to right the wrongs he's done. Though mature for his age, Edward is still young and naive about the world, still holding true to his rigid belief system, something which ironically caused him and his brother such pain. Mustang acts as something of a mentor and watchful protector over Ed, though he keeps him at a distance. This is probably due to him wanting to prevent himself from getting close to anyone emotionally, to keep himself focused on his goals. Mustang seems to keep a pretty serious focus on task, though it's obvious he cares deeply for his men and his country, as well as the Elric brothers. Even his romantic interest with Hawkeye seems to be kept somewhat restrained, although we see the strongest emotions in his friendship with Hughes. In fact, Hughes' death is a huge motivating factor for him in uncovering the truth and initiating real change. This is another strong parallel between himself and the Elrics. Despite his grim demeanor and powerful abilities, I believe another major factor for the character's popularity is actually in the humor he provides. I tend to be pretty mixed when it comes to anime humor. It may be some element of translation errors or cultural differences, plus humor is kind of subjective anyway. Overall, I typically think that the humor in FMA is actually one of the weaker aspects of either series, which I haven't mentioned too much before on my channel. I do think it's funny sometimes, but usually it has to do with the placement of a joke or a gag when the characters go extra cartoony. I think the recurring gag of the play on Fullmetal Alchemist and Ed's height, with people mistaking Al for him, is pretty good. I also think Mustang's bursts of humor are fun simply because they are kind of unexpected. Gets so used to his no-nonsense military bravado, and then he jokes about his first major change being to female officers' wardrobes. This joke could suggest that Mustang's wardrobe taste is akin to old school Star Trek, though I think he's mostly kidding, as Mustang seems to have high respect for all those under his command. In the context of the viewer, if the Elric brothers are relatable vehicles for the core audience to relate to, Mustang is one of the characters we would aspire to be. But Mustang and his team demonstrate the best virtues of what it means to be a soldier, defending the weak and trying to do what is right, even when that can sometimes seem difficult to determine. Plus, the fire alchemy is pretty badass. Since I'm mostly familiar with the dub, I do also think the performance of Travis Willingham specifically in the role was also pretty key in delivering such a commanding performance. Even though many people say he's their favorite character, he's never really been one of mine. This isn't really an insult to the character though, or anybody that likes him, as I believe FMA has one of the greatest varied casts of well-written and interesting characters in the whole medium. Mustang is a good character, just not one of the ones that I gravitated to the most. Still, I think his place in the narrative is very important, and I can see why many people would admire the Flame Alchemist. What do you all think about the Flame Alchemist? Let me know in the comments below, and if you have suggestions for other videos, please feel free to share them as well. And if you'd like to help this channel grow, please check out my Patreon, so you can ensure your specific request gets turned into an interesting video. Any little bit helps. Next time will be another anime-related video, focusing on a very popular film. Alright everybody, thanks for watching, stay magical.